Well, so my entree into all of this, besides being part of Berkeley culture in the 60s, was going to the Amazon and seeing that, what was promised in the higher religions, what was promised in alchemy, Kabbalah, yoga, all these things, was actually just a fact of ordinary experience to the rainforest-dwelling populations that had kept very, very close to the archaic, had never left the hunting-gathering mode, had never burned, had never created pastoralism, had never created phonetic languages, and the most primitive of the primitive. And those people had held on to this vision and the technology that makes it possible. And it was for them entirely a technology of the manipulation of exterior elements in the environment. They didn't have this purity of the body, nature as vile, penetrating, polluting force, which is what informs all of these more vertically organized religions. They have an absolute horror of the world as given. They want to get you out of it. They want you to have as little to do with it as possible. Sexuality is highly suspect, so forth and so on. Well, until the puzzle in all this for me is how this fact, and by this fact I mean the penetration of this alien dimension by these shamanic cultures, how this fact can continue to be hushed up and fail to penetrate into the ongoing cultural dialogue about our own planetary future. And it really is not penetrating. This may appear to be a crowd, but there are billions who know nothing of what we speak. And, to my mind, this psychedelic dimension is part of the human birthright, as much as the sexual dimension is part of the human birthright. Now, there have been cultures in the past, the Calvinism of Geneva, Victorian England, where repression of sexuality was so total that you could almost get through life without hearing about it. And our level of repression of this optional mental life is approaching the same level of hysterical repression. And yet, my take on solutions, if there are any solutions in the predicament in which we find ourselves globally, is they are going to come from a kind of archaic revival, a kind of attempt to step out of the historical vehicle and let it just sail over the cliff without us. Because if we don't step out, leap at the last moment from the historical vehicle, we will be carried with it into some kind of fiery conflagration. That's the momentum of these egocentric, materialistic, positivist philosophies that have gotten loose over the past 1,000 years and are just running amok across the surface of the planet. The escape is forward into the past. In other words, a revivifying of the archaic. And this has been sensed for over 100 years. People like L'Entremont and Alfred Jarry in the arts, and Lobachevsky and Riemann in mathematics, and of course Einstein in the early years of this century. All of these people were anticipating aspects of this archaism, and so was Freud, and so was Jung, and in their own bizarre way, so were the Nazis, and so was the psychedelic revival of the 60s. These are all various pieces, various facets of the archaic possibility. Not all of them, obviously, attractive. But in the same way that the breakup of the medieval world caused a revisioning of classicism, and that's in fact what happened as the medieval world fell to pieces, people who called themselves humanists said, there has to be another way to do it. How can we do it? And they looked back and they discovered Plato and Aristotle and the Hermetic corpus and all of that, and revivified that, and Roman law and Roman architecture and Roman technology, and all of this they revivified. We face a much deeper, more global crisis, and the only common past as a global culture we have is 15, 18,000 years old. The flowering of the Magdalenian era, before the loss of the partnership society, before the coming of the Tanged Point techno-complex, before the fall of Mycenae, before, in what mythologically we call Eden. But the centerpiece, the watchspring that drove the machinery of that ancient culture was the psychedelic experience as mediated by plants. That's what kept the feminine in place, was that the culture and every member of it was frequently experiencing complete boundary dissolution and complete release into an oceanic dimension that gave correct perspective on the microsecond life of the individual. And this is the same experience that people have to some degree with psychedelics today. It's perspective is what it is. And perspective, when practiced on that level of intensity, becomes dissolving of pre-programmed patterns. Because all the near-term models, who am I, who are you, what is this country, what is Western civilization, what is the modern world, these near-term models are simply cultural fictions of some sort. I mean, the fact is that we don't know what is going on. And we have value-charged languages which we lay over the chaos like grids, and we rally others around our language grids to create what we call consensus, understanding, and then we kill everybody who disagrees with that, and that further cements reality. And by this means, we completely opt into some cultural model. And it doesn't matter what the cultural model is. And this is something that I think other commentators on shamanism may have missed, that it is as hard for an Amazonian Indian to take ayahuasca as it is for a resident of Telegraph Hill. There is no culture that prepares you for that. There is no set of socially sanctioned values that will allow you to make sense of the psychedelic experience unless you have within yourself a certain reservoir of native understanding that will pull you through.